All right, back with another video. Today I wanted to talk about the authors that I said I wanted to read in 2022. There were 6 of them that I talked about at the beginning of the book or at the beginning of the year. So I wanted to do a check-in to see if I read any of them that I said I wanted to read. So we'll see. I ended up dividing this into 2 different categories. There were new authors, which are authors that I haven't read before but wanted to pick up a book from them and read. And then there were 3 authors that I wanted to continue reading, meaning I read a book from them previously but had some backlist books on my shelf that I wanted to read some more of their books. So let's start with the new authors and we'll run through those 3, and then we'll talk about the continue authors and we'll run through those 3. So the first new author that I had was Adam Nevill. I had 4 books, or have 4 books of theirs on my TBR shelf. I read 2 of them this year. I read Last Days by Adam Nevill. This was a book that I read earlier in the year. Out of the 2 that I've read of his, this one is my favorite. It is a cult book, and it is kind of almost like a found footage type of book about a documentary crew that tries to go and figure out what happened to this cult. I noticed his books are a little more on the thicker side, but that's okay, you know. I'll just get through them a little slower, but that's okay. And the second book of his that I read is The Ritual. And this one I read solely because I have actually seen the movie prior to reading this, and it is one of my favorite movies, so I wanted to read the book, of course, after seeing the movie. So, you know, not bad. 2 out of 4. So I will, of course, be picking up more of his books. He's a really good horror author. I love what he does to his books. I love his writing, so I will definitely be checking out more of his books. The second author was Sarah Daly. I had 4 of their books on my shelf, and 1 was a new release in 2022 that I purchased, so that ended up with 5 of their books on my shelf. I read 2 this year. I read The Echo Wife, which is a kind of science fiction-y book, and it is a clone book. Really, really good. I kind of heard some mixed reviews going into this, so I was wondering where I fell, but I really enjoyed this. It's a shorter book of hers, but yeah, really enjoyed this one. And the second book, which was the new release for 2022, is Just Like Home, which is a kind of haunted house book. It's the horror, which is obviously different than the sci-fi that I just talked about. And I will say, out of the 2 that I read, this one is my favorite. I do enjoy a haunted house horror book. There is some little creature horror elements in here, as well as some serial killer elements. So it was just made for a very good book. So obviously I still have a lot of their books on my shelf, so I will be getting to those eventually. And the last author that I had was Akwaeke Emezi. I had 3 of their books. Originally I talked about 2 that I had ordered. That order kind of got lost, so those books never came and I just never repurchased them. But they did come out with 2 new books this year. I purchased both of those, so I have 3 TBR books of theirs on my shelf, and I read 2 of them. I read Pets, which is a shorter book, and then I read the follow-up to Pet, which is one of the ones that was released in 2022, which was Bitter. So Pets is a young girl, and the second book is actually from her mother's point of view. Both very good books. Of the both of them, I think I actually enjoyed Pets better, but still really enjoyed the writing. The one that I have on my shelf currently is more of a romance book, so I'm interested to kind of see where they go with that. Alright, now for the authors that I read previously that I wanted to pick something else up from them. First is Jeff Vandermeer. The book that I previously read was Annihilation, which is the first book in the Area X trilogy. So at this point, I had 4 of their books on my shelf. And I say 4 books, but it was like the entire Area X trilogy I counted as 1 book, and then the Bourne duology I counted as 1 book. And the one that I read was the Ambergris trilogy, which is a thick bitch because it has all 3 books from the trilogy in one. This is the one that I read. I had planned to read the Bourne duology. It just, you know, the year got away from me at the end here, and I just didn't get a chance to reading it. So, but I still obviously have quite a few of his books on my shelf, and I will be continuing. I was not all that impressed with this book. I talked about it in one of my other videos because it was one of my bottom books of 2022. But I'm trying not to let that sway me in picking up some of his other books. I figured maybe this one just wasn't for me. So, still looking forward to reading his Backlist books. And the second author that I had on my continue was Stephen Graham Jones. I've actually read quite a few of his books. I read a couple of them last year, and I had 4 on my TBR bookshelf, and of those 4, I actually read 3, so I got through quite a few of them. The first was The Last Final Girl, which is a slashery book, his take on the last final girl trope. This read more like a movie script. Wasn't my favorite of Stephen Graham Jones. It was shorter. I think his writing style is very unique, and he likes to cover a lot of different tropes. So, although this wasn't a favorite, I'm obviously going to continue to pick up his books because I do like to see what he does for the horror genre. The second one that I read is Night of the Mannequins. I liked this one more than the first one. This is a prank from some young kids. They put a mannequin in the theater, and the prank ends up going wrong, and some supernatural stuff ends up happening with the mannequin. So I liked the horror movie aspects of it. I liked that it was kind of set at the theater. The take of the book and kind of the direction that it took was unexpected, but I really enjoyed this. And again, it was on the shorter side. He typically writes more novellas than he does full-length novels. But again, this was a really good novella. I ended up giving it 4 stars. And the third one that I read is My Heart is a Chainsaw by Stephen Graham Jones, obviously. This is another slashery book. I really enjoyed this, and actually I think this is my favorite Stephen Graham Jones that I've read. It's gotten a lot of very mixed reviews. Again, it's kind of a slashery, but there's a lot of nods to the horror genre in of itself. The main character in the book is kind of a horror lover, so she uses the town and stuff that's happening in the town and the people that she comes across with in the town. She kind of slots them in classic roles within the movie genre, or the horror movie genre, which is very cool. This is the first book. The second book is coming out in 2023 called Don't Fear the Reaper. I think it's coming out in February, which this, there's a nod to the witch of this town, and I believe the second book plays up to that. So very much looking forward to it. Again, I have quite a few more of his books on my shelf, so I will of course be reading anything he writes. Alright, and then lastly on the continue list is Sylvia Moreno Garcia. I read one of her books last year, which was Mexican Gothic. So I had 3 of her books on my TBR. I read 2 of the 3. The first one that I read is Gods of Jade and Shadow. This is an old Book of the Month book. This is more of a, I guess, fantasy book. It is from the Mayan folklore. Very, very good book. I really enjoyed the characters. I love the storyline. I also loved the Mayan culture and lore that kind of rode throughout the book. It was very, very interesting. On a completely different note, the second book that I read of hers is The Daughter of Dr. Moreau, which is the retelling of The Island of Dr. Moreau, I think is what it is. This was her new book for 2022. I picked it up. I freaking love this cover. I still love this cover. I really liked this book. In fact, I gave both of the books that I read of hers 4 stars. This was fantastic. It was more horror elements than the science fiction that I read previously. And it had a lot of good creature horror, which my heart will always reach towards. Yeah, I really enjoyed this. I know she has another book coming out in 2023 towards the end of the year, so of course I'll be picking that up to read that. I still have one other book of hers on my shelf that I really want to get to, which is a vampire novel, which if y'all know me, you know I love my vampires. So I'm very interested to see what she does with that book. And then she's got quite a few backlist books that I'd like to pick up and read as well. So yeah. So that is all 6 of the authors. I am happy to say that I at least read 1 book from all of the 6 that I wanted, so not bad. I certainly didn't get to all of my backlist books, so they will remain on my TBR, but that's okay. Just gives me more of a chance to read them. So I'll put up a little graphic with my completion percent. But yeah, I am happy with what I read, and of all 6 of these authors, I am obviously very confident enough in saying I will be more than happy to read anything else they publish because I'm happy with the writing. And yeah, so that's it for today's video. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in my next one. Bye.